and welcome to today's webinar, eduroam Administrator Survey Discussion. User education is a major challenge. This is our mostly monthly webinar focused on all things identity and access management, brought to you by InCommon and Internet2. I'm Jody Tracy, Program Manager for Cohorts and Accelerators at the InCommon Academy, and I'll be your host for today. Just a few reminders about today's program. And Mary, do you mind just flipping the slides forward one? All right. As always, we'll be taking questions and comments live during our using the Zoom Q&A function. So here in Zoom, send us your questions during the presentation and we'll save some time for Q&A at the end. We also encourage you to continue posting in the chat. Your comments are here for group discussion. Just be sure when you're posting, your message is being sent to everyone in the dropdown so everyone can see your messages. Today's event is being recorded. If you registered for this IAM Online, you'll receive an email with a link to the recording as well as the slides. And these materials will also be posted to the InCommon website and the IAM Online YouTube channel. So watch your inbox for those links. We are excited to begin today's webinar, eduroam Administrator Survey Discussion. User education is a major challenge, and to hear from our colleagues at eduroam about the preliminary results from this survey. So to kick things off, I'm excited to go ahead and turn things over to our moderator for today, eduroam Technical Service Manager, Mary Ball.
Hey everybody, I am excited about the presentation today. I do have to lead off by saying Brian probably won't be joining us today. He's having a production issue on his campus, and that is definitely life as a network person, infrastructure engineer. You have to deal with the problems closest to home. So we're glad that Brian was willing to join in, and hopefully we can cover some of the same topics without him today. Alicia and Nadim will also introduce themselves in a moment. I work for Internet2. I've worked here for about a year. Before that, I was an eduroam administrator at a university, and so I'm excited to kind of be in a position where I can get to know about the infrastructure that Internet2 runs, but also to help members of the community and just kind of work on different areas of the eduroam program overall. Alicia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Alicia Marks. I'm a network engineer for the Virginia Community College System Office. I manage our overall eduroam infrastructure, so the Radius servers and the InCommon Federation that all 23 colleges use. And then the colleges themselves actually manage their own wireless. So it's a cooperative effort between us and the college staff. And I'm excited to be here.
And Nadim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Nadim Alkouri, and I'm the CISO here at Springfield College. I oversee also the network systems and infrastructure team, and we manage everything regarding wireless networks and eduroam, of course. And I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think Alicia and Nadim, both have like very specific perspectives on best practices and on the survey. So I'm excited that you're joining us today. I wanted to give one promo for the survey. You might think it's weird that we're presenting about the survey and then also still collecting results, but I think it's valuable because the last time we did a survey of eduroam administrators was in 2018. So a lot of time has elapsed since then. It would be great if you check, it's a little bit of like a little extra step, but if you check the list, like a number of institutions are represented already. If you're not sure, you can check the list. If your institution isn't represented, we'd especially love you to fill that out. And I think we would like to keep this open for quite a bit longer just to kind of be collecting that information. There's a lot about running eduroam obviously is a partnership between the sites themselves and the central eduroam kind of clearinghouse, the top level radius server run by Internet 2. There's a lot that influences the service that happens on your campuses. And I think because eduroam's a community, we benefit from learning these things about each other. And the survey, I think, is a good way to share that information. And I do think like we don't want to keep this to ourselves. We want to share the information out so that the community also benefits from all of this information. So you're not just doing it to help Internet 2, you're doing it to help the community in general. I did put this up here so you can see the kinds of institutions that have responded. It would be great to have more K-12 and community college representation because we know that these schools are often, community colleges in particular. I want to shout out Alicia because she'll talk about it a little bit more in a few minutes, but the Virginia Community College system is 23 colleges run under one kind of organization, but they contribute a ton of traffic as an institution to the overall U.S. eduroam service. So it's great to see representation of different types of institutions in the survey. And we thank you for filling this out and for contributing. And there's also a report, a preliminary report that's going to be available to all attendees. It doesn't cover every single thing. So hopefully we can continue to kind of distribute that information in the future based on what we think you all are interested in. So if there's any question too that you don't see in that preliminary report that we're providing today, definitely you can throw that question in or communicate with us later on if there's something that you're really interested in looking at from the survey. All right, Nadim is going to talk a little bit about why we did the survey now.
All right, thank you, Mary. I am part of the best practices and baseline expectation Internet 2 working groups, and we're using the survey to move eduroam from the best effort to a higher standard, like of global trust. And our mission is basically we're using the survey to help the community to have a higher standard of what we have been doing. So the size and the scope of this growth is that the main point is our transition from a higher ed tool to a statewide community resource. The numbers that we see is that we have 3,800 plus US location. We have 38,000 plus location globally, believe it or not, that have eduroam part of it. The other one that is more like a success is the K-12 success. We have 1,460 plus hotspots between K-12 and libraries and museum through the ESO model. And this has been a great success in moving this. The ESO model has been extremely helpful in moving this forward. In terms of the infrastructure and tools and what we're doing there, is that the Federation Manager help you to get through agreements and have streamlined the process. But the challenge also is that while it's easy for large R1 schools and smaller K-12 districts, the smaller K-12 districts will have limited staffs that still need a helping hand. And I believe this is where the ESO model has come in and helped in streamlining that process and supporting these people in coming on board. See, user experience in terms of what type of user experience we're having and what we're seeing. Technically, everybody's using 82.1x to get onto the eduroam, and then do you have WPA3 for security purposes? But the human element is still just as important. So our survey reinforces that the home versus visited rule. So if we educate our users to connect at home first, that will solve 90% of the support headaches when they travel to your campus. And I'll give you a small example. Here at Springfield College, we have a lot of users that have not correctly configured their eduroam access. So, and this is due to our misconfiguration of radius. We allowed users to connect without putting their domain realm at springfieldcollege.edu, and that has caused them some issues when they traveled abroad. So if you fix that at home and you fix this issue at home, then you will solve most of the issues that when your users travel to other places. So now if you go over why we're doing this from a baseline expectation perspective, and the purpose is from a baseline expectation, the ultimate goal is for us to move from a best ever service to higher standards of trust through baseline expectation. And basically, the survey is helping us shape these three things. One is the safety compliance, and I'm not sure how many people know what SIRFT stands for, which is Security Incident Response Trust Framework for Federated Identity. And basically, it's the security handshake for cross-campus incidents that would help us reach out to other universities or colleges if there's an incident. We have a contact data integrity, making sure that the technical contacts in the Federation Manager are actually current so we can fix outages fast. Usually, sometimes if somebody comes from a different institution and you don't know who to contact, then you'll have to rely on internet too. But if you have a direct contact through that Federation Manager, then we can reach out to directly to these technical people and say, some of your users are having issues while they're visiting our institution, and how can we help fix this? The other one is standardized credentials on the UPN. Make sure that the pushing for the at school.edu format so roaming works perfectly every time. I gave you the example where we have a lot of students that at Springfield College or faculty that did not follow our instructions. And when they end up going to a different institution, they could not connect whatsoever. And as a closing part of this, so basically what we're trying to do is using this data to make sure eduroam is just as secure and reliable for a fourth grader in a rural library as it is for research at an Erewhon university. And it's about building a network we can all trust and use in a secure manner. Mary?
All right, thanks, Nadeem. And just to distinguish, we tend to sometimes talk about them together here at Internet too, but best practices are distinct from the new effort that's starting out this year around baseline expectations. Best practices have been around, I think the original document went out 2020 or 2021, and it's a list of recommendations for what we think. This is a community developed document. Some of the people who wrote it are here in this webinar, and Nadeem has also participated in writing that document. And it's just giving recommendations for how eduroam can be implemented. Baseline expectations is a kind of developing new effort. You're going to hear a lot more communication about that through the rest of this year, just about kind of establishing like what is the minimum required um, for an operational eduroam service, and then giving you also a sense of how is your organization positioned against others, and things that you can do to continue to build on that and maintain that deployment. I'm going to move on to Alicia, who's going to talk a little bit about the challenges in making best practice recommendations.
Hi. So I first want to start off by saying having best practice recommendations to refer to is super helpful for us. So I'm always grateful for any kind of guidance or advice, that we can send out to our colleges. The biggest hurdle with the best practices that we have and in general with colleges is that with 23 schools, we have some really large schools like Northern Virginia Community College, which is one of the biggest in the country, and they have a network engineering department and they don't need us, frankly. At the system office, like, they really don't necessarily need our help or our guidance too much. But then we have colleges that are in very rural areas. I work with one on the Eastern Shore where there's two people that run their entire IT department. So they're not really that interested in, optimizing eduroam. It's just something that the system office told them to configure. They did it, and they don't really think about it too much after that. So again, that's where having best practices and having some documentation that we can send to people, which we do. We do develop our own documentation that we can send out to each school. In our case, each school does have their own. There's not like a unified wireless system across the system. Each community college does purchase, install, and maintain their own wireless. We don't have any standards about vendors. It just has to be an enterprise grade wireless. So for the most part, getting it deployed and getting it broadcasting out there was not a super big problem. But to do anything like try to enforce WPA3, that would probably, we would probably face some hurdles just in a lot of folks not really having the bandwidth to get in the weeds like that. Another thing, I would say the biggest hurdle we have with the best practices is the one that to have eduroam be the single SSID. I would love to see that. Um, our hurdle with that is we have a system-wide credentials that every college uses. That's for faculty, staff, and students. And that's what eduroam is using. And the system office manages that infrastructure. But then each college also has their own Active Directory domain, and that's usually what's used by faculty and staff for logging into their computers and getting privileged access. So in most cases, I would say probably every case, is there's eduroam, which the students use, and then there's another faculty and staff SSID that the faculty and staff use it on campus, and then they're only using eduroam when they travel. So then we run into the problems, where people haven't used eduroam in 6 months, then they travel and they get somewhere and it doesn't work. So it would be great to get to a point where we can have every single college using eduroam as a primary SSID. But that's going to involve us getting everybody's domains underneath our realm in the federation, which is, we're working on doing that, but that's just going to take time and experimentation. Um, I would say, um, what else? So we use the configuration tool provided by eduroam to push the configuration out to our users, and we found that to be super, super helpful. We encourage people to use the Get eduroam app. Um, and the nice thing about the app is that it does walk people through setting it up, and it does automatically put in that at email, at the at whatever.edu, so people don't make that mistake, because we ran into the same problem where a radius was initially configured to let people connect without that, and so people were doing it. So the issue with that was, figuring out how to use that tool was really challenging, figuring out how to get access to it. Once we did get access to it, it was great. And on our documentation, that is how we primarily recommend that people configure it on their device. And that takes a lot of the load off the individual college IT staff, because like I said, some of these staff do not have the resources, to put into helping everybody configure their device manually. So I highly recommend that. I believe there's some new documentation out on how to use that. But it's worth the effort to set that up and use it. Um,
Yeah.
and
I want to
Thanks,
second
Alicia.
that as
Hmm.
well, because when we start moving toward using the CAT tool, that helped us also fix some of the issues where people were not entering the correct realm in their email address.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think we're going to talk more. I think a big pattern that emerged from this survey for me and something that's highlighted in the report is that user documentation, or like how to tell your users how to set up eduroam, um, is a challenge for schools. And I have anecdotal stories of like people who know that I work on eduroam and they say, well, yeah, my institution has eduroam, but I've never used it because I don't know how to set it up. Or I asked them, well, did you put your credentials on your device? And they're like, what do you mean? Why do I have to do that? I know that I'm a user at this institution. So like, so So that gap is, I think, something we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I want to talk about real quickly something that I think was a really interesting st story from the survey. We asked respondents, like, what kind of expertise do you have? And they could select more than one answer. So a lot of Wi-Fi people, eduroam is kind of sitting in the middle between like it's an identity project, it's sharing this federated identity between institutions, sharing that trust, but it runs on the Wi-Fi. A lot of folks who answered are in user support or IT management, and I think one thing that I know from other like talking to the people in the community is there's often like an eduroam champion on a campus, and that champion does a lot. They can be within IT. Sometimes it's even someone from outside IT that like just begs the IT department to like put this in place. They're a professor who travels a lot. This is really valuable to them. There's often a tricky part, I think, where best practices can come in and be really useful is like, what if that eduroam champion at an institution retires or their job changes slightly? Like maybe someone else, maybe you've had to come in and run eduroam in the wake of that champion. So having these resources, documentation, webinars, we hope that that can help you kind of adopt this as your project as well, not just something that someone else ran and now you get to be the one keeping it going. One thing that's interesting too to look at the survey. So the last time there was a survey of eduroam was in 2018. We asked people what vendors they were using for their radius. This is specifically about radius. You see a lot of the same patterns, kind of interesting. One change that stands out in the newer survey is that a few people are using cloud hosted radius. So we actually have a poll that we wanted to ask. We're not going to talk too much about cloud hosted radius today, but we did want to send you all a poll to get your thoughts on whether you would like to see something about cloud hosted radius in the future. I see Stefan is suggesting that video guides are great. He does have a good video guide if you are setting up NPS, Microsoft NPS, which is still a commonly used radius, especially in the K-12 environment. We see a lot of folks coming in um, from the K-12 world who kind of have a vendor lock-in. You know, I know there are people on the call who would say NPS, it's old, you have to use PEEP, but about 80% right now of eduroam traffic is using PEEP. PEEP can be configured securely. We have guides on how to set it up securely. Stefan has a nice guide that's on YouTube from the UK about how to set up NPS in your environment. And so yeah, let us know if you're curious about cloud hosted networking. Cloud hosted radius. We're going to go into a little bit of a deep dive on one section of the survey, user onboarding. This is what I often think of as like the annoying Wild West of like infrastructure folks. Like you have your radius, you have your wireless. People answered on the survey that they were able to set up their wireless and radius relatively straightforwardly. But the users, especially in a bring your own device environment, are challenging. We already kind of touched on this, but Alicia and Nadeem, is there anything else you want to say against manual configuration that you feel like you didn't address earlier?
I would just, oh, sorry.
No, no, go ahead, Alicia. Go ahead.
I mean, I would just say, we provide instructions for every possible type. We recommend get a Jerome app first, and then we have also links to the cat tool individual installation files, and we also include manual instructions. And those instructions are provided to all 23 schools and all of the students. And if I have anything wrong in those instructions, somebody is going to put a comment on the instructions, an anonymous comment, because we allow that, to tell me that I'm wrong. So I don't know, I just say, put your documentation out where everyone can see it and invite feedback, and people will give it to you if it's confusing. And that's not always fun to hear, but it does help you write better documentation.
Actually, that's a really bold. I like that because yeah.
It
Do
wasn't
you
my
want to?
choice.
But if your users can comment right on the tool and say, I don't understand this, this doesn't make sense, that does actually, I think, level that up from a static page telling people what to do. Manual configuration, I think, just to clarify, I mean, I looked at some of the schools. There's some very large, well-known schools that are responding that they do manual configuration. Some people said they did manual configuration along with something else. This is generally thought of as telling people, okay, you've got to go into your wireless settings on your phone or laptop, enter this type in your email with the domain. You're telling people to just like directly enter the information rather than the cat tool, which creates a profile. People go to a website, the tool downloads and puts the profile on the device. The Get eduroam app works with the cat tool. So the administrator sets up the cat tool, but then the link that's produced directs a user on their device to an app if they're on like an iOS device. Um, to put the credentials on their device that way. So these tools work together. Cat is an open source tool, so you don't have to pay for it. There are other folks using, especially if you're using something with certificates, you need to have a tool generally from a vendor to do that. But generally, asking people to type in the information manually, as Nadeem and Alicia both said earlier, means the domain might be missing. There's all kind of information, and also it's just like the amount of time that that person is going to take to put that information is just going to skyrocket. So maybe they never finish. Maybe they never put all the information onto the device, and so they can't use the service.
And also
Um,
privacy, because the outer people don't put anonymous, so that is also exposed from a privacy perspective. And also encouraging people to use, we're trying to encourage people to start using the cat tool. Eventually, we want to move also, see if we could use the get eduroam. The other thing also that you might need to start thinking about is how you're going to deal with certificate being shorter and shorter, especially for radius. So if you're using a CA signed certificate, as of Sunday, certificates are only valid for 195 days. It's going to go down to 100 days next year. Then in 2029, it's going to be 47 days. So technically, it's around 45 to 30 days. How are you going to deal with that? And I believe there was someone in the chat that said, uh, do people know how to trust that certificate? So how are we going to do this, especially with certificate getting shorter and shorter? Then it's extremely going to be important that you automate and encourage people to either use the cat tool, get eduroam, or any other tool to allow the configuration on people's devices. This is going to be extremely crucial. The other issue is that people that like us that still rely on username and password and all that is that if you force people to change their password every 90 days or every 30 days, even though NIST does not recommend that people change their password and use MFA from the security aspect of things, you have a lot of calls when somebody can't log into eduroam. And then how do you deal with that? So those are the things I wanted to also mention. The biggest
so
headache is
Nadeem,
going to be
yeah,
the certificates shrinkage.
Nadeem, when you're folks using Peep and they use the installer, do they need to run the installer again after they change their password?
No, usually no, you don't. But I haven't
So
run
they'll
into
just get a pop-up.
yeah.
Hmm.
I haven't run into issues with people, but some people had some persistent issue when they changed their password, and the only way to do that to fix it, unfortunately, is for them to change their to delete their profile and re-add it again.
Yeah, at least when it's loaded into a profile, it's pretty straightforward to just click through the steps of I know that installing a profile is relatively easy just because in the school where I worked, our help desk often used that if people called and said, "Oh, my wireless is slow," they would say, "Well, just reinstall the profile," uh, which maybe that fixed some other issue. But yeah, you could see in the monitoring tool like how many times sometimes people had reinstalled the profile. So at least it is relatively straightforward clicking through to reinstall that profile if it's something that does solve an issue of joining much easier than going into your settings on your device and re-entering the information and maybe entering it wrong. it kind of surprised me on the survey. So manual configuration often again was put in with other methods, but setting eduroam as a primary SSID didn't eliminate manual configuration as a method, according to the institutions that reported. So there's still quite a few even large institutions primarily relying on manual configuration. Um,
I
yeah,
put
we
in the
talked about
chat the
this,
information about the eduroam app. I believe James had mentioned it. I put it in there. It's a different app than the cat tool.
right? Yeah, but they kind of work together or pair. The administrator sets up the cat app and it works with the Get Eduroam tool. I do agree, like we could do better as NROs, like Eduroam or Internet 2 being the NRO for the US. We could do better to have better information of how to set up CAT. There are plenty of schools using it, so they figured it out. I did get feedback even from folks who said, yeah, I saw that I needed to contact my NRO, but I didn't know what an NRO was. So that's kind of the point where I stopped. You should contact Internet 2. You can send a message to help@incommon.org if you're not set up for CAT, and I can set you up. Um, but yeah, you have to contact Internet 2 in the US if you're not using CAT and you want to take a look at it. It's free to access. And hopefully, yeah, in the near future, we can give you more tools, more recommendations for setting that up. We've done that for specific institutions. But if that's something that people say would help them to use CAT more, I think that's something that we can provide. Um, Another thing that I think is really interesting about touched on this a little bit, but um, it's tricky to tell your users at your site like how that eduroam exists and how to use it. Um, Nadim or Alicia, do you all have any examples from your institutions, or especially if you're in a large system, um, have you heard of any creative methods that schools have used just to advertise that eduroam exists, help students and professors understand what it is? I see a lot of folks, even sometimes with large institutions, saying like word of mouth is how people know that eduroam is there. Um,
In our case, it's very simple. We only advertise at Jerome. So we went to, when I first joined Springfield College back in 2018, they were advertising 7 SSIDs, believe it or not. And I told our CIO at the time, she said, fix wireless for me, please. And I said, okay, at Jerome. And we went down from all these SSIDs only down to one. So everybody knows about it. They have to. This is the only way you can get on wireless. In the dorms, we advertise a separate SSID to allow gaming consoles, TVs, and things of that nature to connect. But that is only advertised in the dorms, and we use a PSK, which is basically, in our case, it's a Juniper Mist solution that we send each student their own separate username and password that is generated on the fly. They get that just to be able to connect their gaming consoles, TVs. But that SSID is only advertised in the dorms. But eduroam is advertised everywhere. And we only use eduroam. And so in our case, it's very simple. You can't make it any easier.
yeah, I saw a lot of I saw the positive trends on the surveys as well. That schools that included information about eduroam in their orientation and onboarding. We also asked people like their estimate. This is doesn't have to be scientific, but their estimate of like what percentage of their user base was set up for eduroam. And people who talked about eduroam in their orientation and onboarding tended to report higher percentages of their users. So you can see schools in eduroam analytics, there are schools that have, they're pretty large schools, but maybe their daily eduroam people connecting using that school's IDP or like 100 people a day. So it just seems clear that just the eduroam is not extremely well socialized at the school, but schools that put it into that orientation for new students or new staff generally have a bigger percentage of their user population, even if it's not the primary SSID, they just have more people taking advantage of the service. Um, I'm curious if attendees, if people want to put in the comments too, if you've done anything creative or if there's anything that you think would be helpful from Internet 2 to advertise eduroam. Um,
The other thing that we've done when we first rolled eduroam to educate everyone is that we created the QR code that we hung on people on in every dorm on the knob for before you go into your room, but also in offices as well to help say if you scan the QR code, it will take you to a link that would educate you on what you eduroam and why we were moving to eduroam. And that has helped a lot. I wish we had set up the cat tool from the beginning so that we won't have any issue. And I wish we did not misconfigure free radius also to allow people to log in without their that at springfieldcollege.edu domain.
yeah, but I mean, part of running eduroam and part of running infrastructure is that mistakes happen or like error patterns happen. I think part of this survey and part of looking at like analytics overall from the Internet 2 perspective, and that's something that baseline expectations will hopefully give you more of a window into is like how is your institution positioned among all other US institutions. But part of that process is um, taking stock of where you are at this moment and like seeing those things that could be better. So it's not if you have a lot of if you don't have many users configured or if you have users out there configured without their realm, that should be fixed, but it doesn't mean that you're alone for sure. This is something that this is why we're talking about it because it's a fairly common issue. Alicia, did you want to say anything? Because you have a lot of traffic coming from the Virginia community colleges, but you have a very, you're sitting kind of in the central office. You have a lot of folks throughout the interstate who are working off your deployment.
Yeah, so I am not aware of anyone on the campus level doing anything creative. I know when we went live, we pushed out like a little some info about it through Canvas and also through our like we have our My VCCS where people will log into that. We pushed that out. Um, but I'm not aware of anything creative being done on campuses. And we still have quite a few like I said, that we have campuses that are like, yeah, the system office told us to put eduroam out there, but it's not their biggest priority. So,
Yeah, but there's still people
but
connecting. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think one thing I
yeah.
would like to do, and I haven't done this yet, is kind of create like a press packet. I know in some of the support orgs, like we talk about Amanda at Utah a lot, she has kind of a press packet that they distribute that's specific for Utah that schools in their K-12 kind of support organization can put out. And that's something I would like for Internet 2 to create. People can tell me if they think they would use that, whether it's like a sign or something that says like eduroam is here or short descriptions that talk about the value of eduroam that you could distribute on your campus. If you think that would be useful, you can say something about it. But yeah, I think the big story is that it matters how your users learn about eduroam because they're more likely to have it if they understand what it is. I always so kind of saw this because I came from a school where eduroam was the primary SSID, and I think like in a way at times, like even our help desk, maybe we kind of forgot that eduroam was like a global thing. We thought about it as a thing we had on our campus. So um, talk about that part, but part of the enhancement or enticement of setting, like taking the extra trouble to set this up, tell people it's secure. It's making it easy for you to roam to other campuses because students, professors travel, researchers, grad students, they travel to other academic institutions and not having to worry about getting on the wireless every time you travel for work or school or research is a huge benefit. Um,
Yes, and I mean, like in our case, I mean, we see a lot of people from UMass, University of Massachusetts, and Amherst here and use it. They're biggest people that come here because we have professors that go back and forth. So we know it works and all that. The only thing is that when it comes to eduroam is that if you have eduroam and you're operating in a metropolis, big metropolis like Boston or New York or something, you're going to have a lot of eduroam contentions, and then your chances are you're going to bounce between different schools, because we've seen that because when we had a campus in Boston and we were in one building, there were Boston University, we were there, there were other schools, and we were all advertising eduroam. And then that was another issue as well that you might have to deal with in big metropolis areas. But and again, I know that if people don't travel, and I think someone had put it in the chat, if they don't travel, they won't see the benefit. But if you're only advertising eduroam, they have no choice. And they will see the benefit of it, especially if you travel in Europe. I mean, they have eduroam in a lot more places than what we have here in the US, and it makes it extremely, extremely helpful when you're traveling overseas. And you can get on eduroam very easily. You don't have to pay for cellular data roaming. You can't beat that.
Yeah. The other thing is
Yeah.
like when we say travel, it doesn't always have to be a long trip. Most people travel in their region or in their state. Um, and there's an eduroam map at eduroam.org, where you can look at, you can zoom in on your area and see the other schools. I know, like, I'm in Eastern Virginia, so there's college campuses that I can go on or near and connect. Um, One thing I'd like to do in the future is kind of release this to eduroam admins, but give you kind of a benefit of a map that shows you all the schools in your area and highlights the ones that have eduroam and the ones that don't. I think that's kind of an interesting tool of thinking about your area and um, people that could have eduroam who are near you. Maybe there's a pattern of like a community college near a four-year college where you have a lot of crossover already, and one side doesn't have it. Um, so that's kind of a natural benefit to if you have two campuses that are close together and you already have students or K-12 and higher ed together. You already have people crossing over between those institutions. Eduroam allows you to give those folks the benefits of visiting both. I will say, kind of as a joke, there's a whole Instagram account called Eduroam Critic, and this is a commentary on how long it takes sometimes to set up Eduroam on a device. Um, Shout out to the F1 movie here also, but this is the reason why, like, yeah, students will complain even if you set up a profile and make something that they can download. Like, they will also still complain about that. Students like to complain, but letting them trying to make it as easy as possible for students to set up eduroam is a win, and maybe get slightly less memes made about you. It's also true that when you have eduroam, it sometimes becomes a brand for owning like any wireless problem. I saw this at a school where we went from our school branded SSID to eduroam for everybody. And now people say eduroam is down or whatever, but that's it's part of the process. And they're getting that benefit of seamless roaming, secure connection that they wouldn't have without that. I think we're at a point here where if people want to send off, maybe if you want to come off mute, you can say a question. If you want to put a question in the chat, um, we'd love to hear from you, especially on these topics. I think these are hot button topics, right? Why is user onboarding so hard? Why is communicating with users so hard? Um, do you have any thoughts about how Internet 2 could help you with these challenges? Yeah, David Allen is pointing out that the sports teams, as athletes, athletics are the ones who benefit a lot. Oh, sorry, you can't come off mute. So put your put your question in the chat. Um, let's see.
There was a question in the chat where someone said, what should be done as we become aware of campuses who are not configured eduroam authentication correctly? And I think this is where the federation manager and the eduroam map can help. But I think this is where we're trying to see how we can get you in touch with those different people. The other one may be help at Incommon that would help you reach out to the other administrators of that particular site and to let them know that they have something misconfigured and it's not working. So that's one aspect of it, I think.
Yeah, Jeremy I says he's a fairly new eduroam site, and he has organizational policies that differentiate between personally owned devices and managed devices. That's a pretty common problem on a college campus. They have a long-term interest in eduroam being the default or primary SSID, but they're stumbling a bit on how to get device and user information integrated in an eduroam compatible way. Are there recommendations how to go about this? I mean, one side, I think what you're saying is partly related to the installer, right? So using the eduroam configuration assistant tool would help you create something for those user managed devices. If you already are using, if you already have, or solving the problem with one of those user populations is probably a good start. Um, if you can set up this, whatever devices are in your mobile device management or the managed devices for your campus, going through the process with user devices. We do have some documentation in the eduroam knowledge base about user devices, but I also agree that that could be better. You're talking about, I don't know if you want to say anything more, but I think you're talking about exactly what settings to choose um, depending on your radius type or your EAP type. Um, do you want to add anything? I think so. Both Alicia and Nadim, you're doing it's primarily PEEP, right, that you're using at this time?
Yes, we're primarily using PEEP. We have not moved toward EAP TLS or EAP TTLS. The reason is cost. And the other thing that we at Springfield College we have to address is that because we only advertise eduroam, but we have an outreach community program where we have students from middle school and high school. They come to the college where we have volunteers that help them get their homework done and things to make sure that they're not falling behind. And they need to be able to get access to wireless because they come in with their own Chromebook that has been given to them through the high school or middle school. And so since eduroam went away, so now we're looking at how can we give them access to eduroam in a secure manner, and we are looking at maybe developing something internal, and where we would issue a certificate that is only self-signed certificate that's only valid for one day or a week for these students, and then it will go away. And if we can get it to work correctly, I believe that we are looking at releasing it on GitHub or something for others to take advantage of. This is what we are looking at, but we are primarily right now PEEP MSChat version 2.
Hmm. Yeah, Jeremy clarified he's talking about if you have one SSID but different user profiles, how can you separate that access? I assume, Alicia, also you've dealt with that. Um,
I would say that we are not doing that right now. So right now, everyone is just sort of getting like a guest access on eduroam, and that's something we would work toward in the future. And that's where the issue of each individual college has their own local domain, and that's generally what they're using. They're using those credentials for the privileged access. I think that is what is going to be that will be the way that we do it, which I don't think that's something everybody would necessarily do. In this case, it's a limitate it's kind of a complication that works in our favor because then you can just say the people with privileged access, they're going to have an account at that local domain and they can use that account and get the privileged access. And then use
right.
the system-wide account to get the regular guest/student access.
The other thing also we were thinking till we get maybe the self-signed certificate up and running is that maybe to create temporary AD accounts to allow these students to get on board, but that AD account only have limited access to other things, and also it's short-lived in AD. So this is one aspect of it, but that introduces another set of issues from a security aspect of things. But this is what we are thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the many things, like these are realistic challenges. You have one SSID, but then internally, those users are getting routed different places. They have different types of access. We also asked people on the survey, I didn't put this in the report, but it may be something that people are interested in, is like what kind of access are people giving to guests? Um, but one of the things that's definitely a recommendation, and Jeremy, since you're starting out with a fresh deployment, it's often helpful to solve kind of one element, get that working. If eduroam isn't your primary SSID now, right, you can move to put your managed devices on it and work out that system and then create step two to get those BYOD devices. So you don't have to bite off the whole thing at one time. You have a lot of, you can be the eduroam champion, you can figure out how you want to implement it, and then someday someone else will have to come in and run what you created. Many other people are coming into a finished deployment, and like what a lot of people say is, oh, someone else built this. It's still working, it's resilient, it doesn't stop working. But best practices can also be about going in and tweaking and improving some of those things. Maybe some of those aspects were left for later, but you can pick one of them and kind of work on. We know that people are also working on many things at the same time. Nobody gets to work on eduroam as their only thing in their job. But picking one next thing is often that, something that helps you deal with those challenges. Um, Anders says ratio between PEEP and EAP TLS. So in the US, so it's actually interesting. I wanted to get some statistics on this, but it didn't happen in time for the webinar. But we're generally running about 80% PEEP and about 15 and 5, 15 EAP TLS, 5 TTLS, and it's been pretty consistent for a long time. Brian, who wasn't able to make it today, is a big proponent of EAP TLS. He actually made a presentation last year about moving his school. He called it ripping off the Band-Aid, moving his school to EAP TLS, and talking about the reasons why he did it and also the reasons why it was challenging and took them a while to get there. Some of that is around vendor tools. I'm sure Stefan and Paul can go into a lot more detail, but you can deploy certificates with CAT, but you also need to create your own PKI at that point. So there are vendor tools that do the whole thing for you and make it a lot simpler. But often for schools, the radius vendor that they're using and the challenge of needing a complex onboarder is maybe what's keeping them from that ETLS. I think it's challenging too. In the old best practice document from 2021, we told people that ETLS was the best practice, but I feel like the new document may modulate that. There are pros and cons of each of the EAP methods, and EAP PEEP can be implemented securely. That is the contention of the folks who run our Radius infrastructure, who have access to all of those Radius messages, the Radius EAP messages. So we realize that depending on your institution, you may not be able to control whether you can move to EAP TLS. It's better to implement PEEP securely in that scenario. Anyway, Anders also is
There's
putting in a plug.
one
Yeah,
thing I
go
wanted
ahead.
to say
Yeah.
really quickly.
Mhm.
And there is an eduroam technical class that Internet 2 puts together, and I'm going to be honest with everyone. I've taken it twice, and I paid for it twice myself, and not Springfield College, and has been extremely helpful because it went into some technical details, especially how to make things secure for your constituents, how to make sure that you don't expose certain information. And we've seen that through the eduroam communities and this is one of the things that we will be looking at from a best practices perspective, is how you make sure that you don't expose someone. So if someone visiting another school And if you accidentally expose something is not configured correctly, you expose which building they went to, which classroom they were into, and also you expose their username in terms of their email address. And I'm going to give another shout for that technical class. If you have a chance to take it, please do. It's been extremely helpful. It helped me every time I took it, I learned something new. So this
Yeah.
is the last
Is
thing I
that the
wanted to say.
radius class? Is that the radius course?
Radius troubleshooting. Yeah, so we're going to offer it again in
Okay.
September. So we're trying to have a regular cadence of March and September. We heard from folks that you need to tell us when it's coming with a long runway so we can make sure we request the funding and have the time off. And you always have the infrastructure person challenge of like you're trying to attend a 2-day class and um, something happens and you get called away, like what happened to Brian today. So,
And
but
Stephen had put in
yeah.
something from GIS saying
Hmm.
that they also run something every 3 months in the UK. So
Hmm.
if you have chance to attend these, it will help you tremendously. It will also help your constituents to be on eduroam in a secure manner and all these things. And that is one of the crucial things. Privacy and confidentiality is also great, and it has to be part of eduroam.
All right, Jenny's put a poll up, the last like 60 seconds, but I appreciate everybody coming today. I have a question about learning about the Eduroam community and updates. I am glad that we had folks come in today. Sometimes I think we feel like at Internet too that we don't um, always hear from a broad swath of the Eduroam community. People are busy, it's hard to get their attention. So this question is partly about like, how would you like to hear from Internet too? Do you feel like there's a good enough community if you want eduroam information? But yeah, to that end, I'm really happy for everyone who filled out the survey. You're definitely helping the eduroam US, eduroam worldwide community. I've heard from Stefan that he wants to run a poll, run a survey in the UK, and now maybe he'll have ammunition to do that. But we appreciate your contributions and not only running the service, but also talking about the service, which is a big way that we can improve it, maintain it, keep it going. All right, no one is frustrated on the poll. That's great. Well, thanks everyone. I think we're close to the end. So, Jody, do you need to close it out? Thanks to the panelists.
Yes, thank you all. Thanks so much for your insights today, and thanks to all of you for attending and engaging. This is clearly a very hot topic, so thank you for bringing all of this to us, Mary. And as we leave today,